James, how are you first off? I haven't seen you in a bit.
Yeah, and I need to apologise for my lack of sort of visibility
No
recently.
worries.
Uh, it, I was just talking to CC a while ago. I've been on holiday in Egypt for just over 2 weeks, and I got back last
Nice.
Wednesday, and I switched off completely from all sort of forms of communication, and I've come back to a really busy moment in my job and at home, and then struggled to find the energy to sort of reconnect because I've quite enjoyed being disconnected.
Yeah.
My intention isn't to stay gradually build up to it because I found there's quite a lot of commitment to um, communicating in all these different forms and reading people's stuff. And what I've needed to do is just integrate myself gradually. So I'm
Yeah,
here. This
yeah.
is the first sort of chat I've had with anybody really since I've come back, other than work. And how are you?
I'm good, doing well. No worries. I completely understand the need to sometimes reduce the scope or the attention span on multiple things. It feels overwhelming sometimes. I definitely like took a bit of a brief on LinkedIn at least. So Substack has been at least mostly the only touch point of engagement so far. So I think that's good. And Egypt sounds like a really nice vacation. I've yet to actually visit Egypt as a vacation. I've only did like a 1 day layover, even though I'm like very close to the region.
Yeah, you're not far from there. It was my first visit, and it was wonderful, really
Nice.
lovely. Um, Surprisingly, more culturally different than I expected as well. But I liked that. I enjoyed that, and the people were fantastic. So,
Cool.
yeah, very good. So I guess paradox.
I think we already started talking about paradox, the paradoxically being wanting to connect with everyone and not necessarily, sometimes feels a bit of both, right? And connection and disconnection and the need for both. I don't know. It's always been I don't like yin and yang because it always implies balance, and I'm not a fan of balance. uh, I feel things go in tandem more so than not. We just like to justify them as, oh, we're balancing things because it sounds better. Uh,
I haven't actually said that out loud before, but I think I have a natural tendency to not worry about balance, and the consequence of that is I think I end up involved in lots of things that I enjoy, and I probably want to do more things than I've got capacity for. And
mhm.
people say, "Oh, that you need to get the right balance." And I don't. I'd rather have too many things to do and do whatever I need to do in the moment than not enough things or balanced. Um, so I think the consequence of that is probably just being feeling full and active all the time. But that's where I want to be, I think. I enjoy being like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel at least someone said that about me. There's no lack. If I don't have a project, I create one. And if there's not one, I have 17 I'm involved in. And that's kind of fun. Even though I'm not necessarily catching up to all of them. That's fair too. Paradoxically, in some sense, it's even like, doing nothing in between all of that is fair game as well. Even taking breaks within it feels like a natural thing to happen. So I, uh, I think there is a certain level of engagement in that, even for some people. I think that's the interesting part, and that what you brought or was said on the show of silence is in some ways as well. Is like we, I want to put it, like when we try to do something or kind of the justification of it becomes there, then it kind of is no longer true too, in some way. Uh, and I believe, I think I wrote about that too, on listening specifically, because I said if you're trying to listen, you're not listening. You're worried about the listening, so you're distracted by that, and then henceforth you stop listening already. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how those you have to hold both truths simultaneously somehow. Uh, and I think the interesting part there as well, it is doable, even though it's not as easily explainable.
Yeah, I agree entirely with all of those points, particularly around listening. That's the passion I have, and I see there's so many models: deep listening, active listening, empathetic listening, listening to understand, listening to answer, all all these different models, and then you have 5-step models to be a good listener, 6-step models, 7-step, 8-step, all these models, and there's research to prove that they work, or people feel more listened to if you're using such and such a model or a process. And I think there's some truth in that. If you go this way, where you're trying and performing listening, you go that way, and it does have some impact because people feel more listened to. But I think that if you remove that performance, and this is a bit where, in a way, that could be a performance by removing performance. But I think if you're letting go of the performance and trust that there's nothing needed, I feel the listening can get better that way.
Hmm.
Um, but that's so counterintuitive to all of the academics that want to atomize all listening. And what exactly are you doing? I'm not doing anything. I'm being there with somebody. That's it. And I think the quality of listening is actually better. I can't prove it because you can't research it. Uh,
Hmm.
and what you're saying there is the act of sort of almost doing nothing is a bit like a performance as well. And I feel like, how do you separate when you truly are not performing versus performing, doing nothing or doing silence or listening well? Um, and I get plenty of opportunities to observe what happens. And I feel like the most powerful, or it's really hard to explain, like you say, but the deepest connection or somebody feeling heard and connected comes from when neither there's a speaker nor a listener.
Hmm.
And maybe there's an individual thinking out loud rather than speaking. They're just flowing with their thoughts, and the other person is holding that, allowing that presence and space to be there. And I think that's the purest form of listening or connecting or whatever it is. Um, and I've got some examples of it as well, and I can talk through that. But the very point then of going back and telling the listening world, this is how you do it, you're falling back into that trap of models and processes again. And it's like a vicious circle.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. And I think really what is interesting about those things, and I struggle with that a lot too, because of course, I come from an engineering background, so models, processes, etc., all of those structure, all of that comes in like a second, almost second nature to me. But I realized something as well that, especially when we talk about the academic and those flows, it's limited by observing. Like the limitation is the observation. Like, right, we measure things on that we can observe. So what happens if things are happening that you cannot observe? Like, right? And and only now we're starting to account for that because now we're playing with that in quantum, where we start observing one state in two states by doing some of that, right? But before, all science was you observe, and based on that observation, you rationalize. Okay, but what if what is happening you cannot observe? Like, right, it's not in me nodding and me like, right, and it's not in what I say, and like it's outside of the observation. So, and if it's outside of the observation, does it mean it doesn't exist? And that's a really fascinating aspect to it. which basically renders science trying to catch up to you, but at the same time trying to catch up to all of those things, but at the same time limited by the tool it's using to kind of create that rationale. Uh, and that would leads me as well, like why models work and why models don't work. Because I think all models are obsolete. Actually, I would even say it differently. The purpose of every model is to basically kill itself or die. Because I think at the end of what ends up happening is people who actually master a model eventually never use it. Like it becomes usually what you realize everyone like masters, they say they are using all of these models, but at the same time, they're using none of them, right? In some form. And what we usually, kind of justify it is like you've internalized it so much that it becomes one with you. It's interesting, right? That is as if to say that the model was useless. But find models it is a good distraction. I've realized that in organizations. You put a process, you get people to be distracted by the process so they actually can do what they need to do because the process gives them the safety that this is what's supposed to happen. So the mind shuts up for the most part. And realistically, everything just flows. And then magically says, congratulations, process, you fixed everything. Well, it's bullshit, but that's okay, right? It's a good justification nonetheless. And find models the same way. I resisted them for so long. But then I realized, you know what? That's fine. They 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 kind of make sense until they no longer make sense, even if you know from the beginning they are useless.
That's a nice way of putting it because I have thought of place for models, and there is a place for models. So if we go back to listening, a very basic active listening model would help somebody on the other end feel more listened to. Whether they actually are is a different story. It may appear to them that they're being heard more because
Mm.
somebody's displaying all the attributes of active listening. So this person feels more heard. That person's not really listening, they're pretending because they're following a model. But at the end of the day, what are we trying to achieve? If the person is feeling more heard, then is that success?
Yeah, I guess, and why not? Like, right?
Well, why are we trying to listen? What's the output? Sorry for interrupting there. It just popped out.
no, not at all. Not at all.
So I'm wondering, in some sense, those models are successful. But I believe where I'm sat with models is that I think for that very fact that they're almost superficial and very foundational. So they're almost like a bit like what you were saying. You can get in there and start following something if you don't really know what you're doing. It's working to a degree because the other person's feeling more listened to. And what that happens as you're using that model is, I think people feel more confident. Oh yeah, I can listen now, and that other person's feeling more listened to, and they even say thanks for listening to me. They get to that point, and actually the listening's not been very good because they've been following a model and not really listening, but they're feeling confident. And I think what happens then, you feel more confident and you let go of the models because you believe, yeah, I don't need to follow that model anymore. And then when you start letting go, that's when the real listening happens. So I think they've got a place, and you go this way following models and performing, you could choose, or that happens. And then the other way of more and more letting go, the more you let go of the models because maybe you're confident or whatever, they're not needed. The further you go down that way, the better the connection is, and then it doesn't even become listening. And I think this is where also words aren't good enough. Then you start getting down to a point where words can't describe what's happening. So I'll stop there because I've got no more words.
No, What I find fascinating in that specifically is first off that they serve to a certain point. I think that's true. I think where I really don't like models is where you think that they are the absolute answer. So when you come and it's like this is the holy grail, follow this, and if you follow this to the T, blah blah blah, you will achieve that. And I am completely like annoyed by that notion, mostly because it makes you feel as if that the model is the go and end goal, like right that this is the model which is that's it, and then there is no other. And I think that's BS.
Yes.
And the other aspect of that, which I find interesting, is like, how do you achieve something you don't know what the experience of it is, in a way? Because I truly believe in a lot of times I deal with change all the time, and in organizations and like behavior. But how do you tell someone about a new thing they just don't know what it is? Like they've never experienced it before. So no matter how much you talk about it, they haven't experienced it. I'll give you an example. This is a little bit like tacky, but whatever. I was trying to do physiotherapy the other day, and the guy kept saying, "Activate your glutes." I was like, "Great, I'm gonna try." Every time I tried to do that, I activated my neck muscles because I overcompensated with my neck muscles. And then we spent like an hour and a half trying to find what that means. And the reason I could recognize that because it was the same issue when I was doing singing training. They would tell me like, lower your larynx or use your palate. And I'm like, I have no clue what that means. Like, it's again, it's speaking, you know what is being told to you, but like, what does that feel like? Right? Or take a deep breath, like use your diaphragm. What does that mean? Like, right, I'm breathing, like that's working, right? What's the problem? It took
Yeah.
me six months to find what diaphragmatic breathing is, trying all of these different models. Breathe here, try here, close your chest here, close your stomach there. All of those nonsense, basically, for the most part. And I was like, oh shit, this is where deep breathing is. I had no clue. And I think it's the same thing with a lot of, paradox in that sense is like when you don't know really what that experience is, you end up like playing all with all of these models to kind of find it out. And I think that's fine. But once the model becomes like that's the only way you can do it, and if you don't know it in that way, it doesn't work, I think that becomes a problem. And I see that in organizations too, where they say, okay, this is the process, follow the process, no one diverges from the process, and if the process, like right, nothing works. And I'm like, if actually you have really good people, they should already be beyond the process. The better the people are in like managing things, the most likely the process becomes more useless. Actually, the more you tie them to it, the more it becomes basically detrimental because now they are optimizing for the process, not optimizing for the best that they can do.
Mm.
And it's interesting how these things start like kind of negating themselves at some point.
This is a really interesting conversation because I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about. I'm aware, I've thought about with listening, you can go one way and perform more, and the other way perform less. And they both have some sort of outcomes, but I haven't thought about the necessity of some level of performance to be able to get the feel, like what you've just said there, or to know or experience something that's trying to be achieved. And your breathing example is a really interesting one because I guess now you've experienced this uh, diaphragmatic breathing. Now you've experienced it. What's different?
The difference, I think, is that now you know if you got it or not. Like, right, retrospectively, not in the like, right. So what used to happen before is, and I used to do like I would say it to my instructor, or like I'm breathing though, and then of course my chest is rising like up and down, and I have no air volume to produce any sound, like right. But I was like, oh, I'm breathing deep. I'm like taking very very deep breath, right? But I couldn't tell. what is a deep breath diaphragmatically versus a deep breath chest versus a deep breath with which is both diaphragmatic and chest. Like the nuance between all of those is not that far. I'm breathing, like right. If
Yeah.
you tell someone is like, you know, I've been doing it all my life, so this must be working. So otherwise, I'd be dead.
So you,
So
so
the
you
diff
the perform to get to that point. You've had to do some performance of a process or whatever to get to that point of experiencing it. Now you've got to that point.
Yeah,
Do
and I think now
you
you recognize it.
So now
Like right.
you recognize it, but do you still have to perform to get to there? Or because now you recognize it, you can let go of the process?
No, now it becomes almost automatic, right? Because it's the same thing I think as before. Like I wasn't thinking about breathing, right? I really now you're breathing and you're not paying attention. Oh, is the air going in or is it going out? Am I taking a deep breath enough? Am I sitting on my like all of you don't do those things. But here's what probably changed. So for example, I usually speak 6, 7 hours a day. Like I'm in back-to-back meetings, I'm talking all day long. So no wonder. But my voice at the end of the day doesn't die, right? I don't lose my voice at the end of the day. And that's because I'm actually taking deep breaths and sitting on my breaths when I'm like speaking rather than using my throat.
Mm.
So as a consequence, which has nothing to do with breathing, you notice the difference. And I think it's the same with listening. As a consequence, you find more valuable connection, like more, but not because you are focusing on the listening in a way, right? So that's
That's
probably what changed it.
so I do a listening role as a volunteer outside of work. And when you're training up for that, and even all my connections in the listening world, you speak to people about good listening or whatever that is, and they'll say listening is hard work. It takes a toll on your body. So always have a glass of water, have a rest because you can't continually listen all the time. And I don't find it tiring. And I think that's down to this performance aspect of it. You don't know what it is. So you try and models. You're thinking about it. You're conscious about it. This is mentally draining me.
Hmm.
Whereas the best listen I have, I could do it for days on end because it feels it's easy, it's light. I'm not doing anything. So I think that touches on what you're saying there. Something changes.
I think the effortlessness is key in those things for sure. You really feel it becomes it's no longer consuming energy. I used to think of every conversation, and I think that's previously is you go into and you're saying, okay, how much energy this conversation is gonna consume out of me, like right? And I need to basically balance my day to make sure some conversations, like right? Now I engage with the day old conversation. I'm not like I'm tired, don't get me wrong. Like physically I'm tired, like my body and like my mind is tired, but I don't feel like I'm being consumed. There is no consumption happening.
Mm.
Um, and that's what people I think don't know because before, and I can tell you before, all I knew is like I'm being consumed. This conversation was super taxing. This conversation, like it drained me completely. And don't get me wrong, it's not good. I don't have conversation these days which are like kind of negative or like not positive and like really, yeah, but it's not like they drain me. Like I don't have energy for anything anymore. That's the interesting aspect of it. No, it's fine. Like, yeah, they are depressing. They're not necessarily positive. So, right? And I speak to it in that fashion. I say they were like not good conversations, but did they drain my energy in the sense that I can't have the next conversation? No, there is some, and I think that's the elements which are really interesting here, and there is a nuance to them. You still have difficult conversations. You still have conversations which are taxing in certain sense, but at the same time they don't deplete you.
Yeah. And I wonder if the outcomes are better.
I I know for sure, at least personally, reflecting on me, I think they are better.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the best example of that, the first time I did this, I had a meeting with the CEO. That was 2 years ago. And it was around the time when I was doing a lot of the singing training and etc. And it was the first time I go into that meeting and I had prepared nothing. I didn't go and like try to basically over optimize what I'm gonna tell him or nothing. I literally, went in the conversation and kind of just sat whatever that conversation. And I left that conversation. I was like, holy shit, that was one of the best conversations I have ever had. And again, the risk there is very high, right? This is, I'm engaging directly in with the CEO for the most part. And I wasn't at the level I was in now, even like, right. I was even if in the hierarchy food chain of companies, I was not even at the level of seniority I am in now. So it's interesting how, and I think that's part of the depletion or not, because I left actually excited and happy about every single thing that happened in that conversation. And don't get me wrong, I didn't get like a raise and a bonus and I get the role next week. None of that happened. That was not the point, but it still was a very good conversation. And and I think there is better outcome, actually significant, but it's not in probably what today people measure better outcomes. Like, yeah, it was, I got the next career level and all of that, like, right. But simply the outcome could be a better conversation. That's
Mm.
worth it too. Not a draining conversation. That's worth it too. Not a suffering or like feeling it as a burden conversation. That's worth it too.
And just there's something in there that feels more natural.
Yeah. I have no clue if we talked about paradox or not, but you get what you get. You
There's
you just that's what ended
yeah,
up happening.
there
I,
was paradox in there, loads of it. There's loads of
no, no, I love the models and them being maybe obsolete from the start, but yeah, at some point you said they're a good distraction for the mind. Um, yes, it all comes down to like what's the purpose, what's the goal of what we're trying to achieve. I like also the performance aspect of how singing training then benefits like more in a business context. I have an example in my mind. It's also performance. There's for American football, there was one team where a coach trained the runners that had to do the long sprints on the side by putting them in a catapult. So they had to like rest in the catapult, and then the catapult fired the player so that the player could experience what it's like to run faster than he normally did. So
Mm.
first you have to experience the speed of running faster before you can, yeah, believe or like become accustomed to that speed. And so yeah, sometimes some exaggeration or some model can help you recognize what it is you have to become comfortable with. Yeah.
Mm. I'm feeling better about models now. Didn't want this. I was letting go of models. Now you're telling me they're really important.
Um, I don't know. I think whatever ends up working, I think the difficult answer is always that there is no one answer, and you can find the use in it. I'm building now a model for like coaching with AI, and one of the things I was struggling with so much is I was always optimizing for like almost someone who's mastering it. Because if someone is really mastering it, a lot of like the model becomes obsolete. And then I realized but this is for someone who's really starting. Like they don't have a feel of like then what I will tell them as a master will become like philosophy or will become nonsense. They're gonna like not be able to connect with it. And I think that got me to realize, oh, like there is value for that. There is earlier on, there is might be a value, and because you gotta like get into it to understand eventually, then you're like, oh, now I know what this means. Now I know like there is no real outcome in the conversation and as like or a predetermined outcome. But probably in the model, I need to tell you like what is next. Kind of just because it makes you feel safer, it gives you like some stepping stones until you get a feel of what that looks like, and then you move on. It's really
Yeah,
interesting. Anyway.
it is. And I always, I was reading a book in Egypt, and it's around, I can't remember exactly, but the topic was around how dogs don't really think about what they're trying to achieve. They just are.
Hmm.
And it comes back to the humans are the ones that we're trying to do something. There's outcomes, there's processes, models, there's changes. We're the only ones that really do that. But then I was thinking to your example there, Carlo, a dog would experiment and try and know, not intentionally knowing what's coming next, but my dog would, he doesn't like water really now, but he'd have ran in the sea and then like, oh, it's cold and ran back out. And then he'd have experimented a few more times and then decided he doesn't like it. There wasn't a process he was following, but there's that sort of confidence or knowing what's coming next. I run in the sea and it's freezing cold, or I don't like it. That's what comes next. So he knows if he avoids the sea, he's okay, sort of thing. So there's some, it's not a model he's following, but there's something in there around safety or knowing what's coming next, I think,
Hmm.
that might either come naturally without effort, or maybe the models are shortcutting the natural side of things. So I could go a whole lifetime and find out I'm really good at coaching or not, or I could use a grow model and play around with it and find out I just can't do that, or I can. So maybe the
Hmm.
models are a shortcut to knowing what comes next.
Absolutely. It's a bit of an experimentation, I think,
Yeah.
and the reverse optimization to our society too. Like, right? Because we are prepackaged with a lot of these bias. So in some way, we're shortcutting what we already optimized for previously in some ways. So there is something playing out too. Uh, because like culturally in how we absorb and like digest things. Oh my God. Like I think there is so much of that kind of ingrained in us. It's really sometimes hard to break out of it or even recognize that there's something to break out of in the first place, which is
Yeah.
as well like fascinating.
People struggle with that. That's where this overwhelm and burnout comes from because now
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
to do all these so many things really well, I feel like, oh, well, I need to be good at everything.
Hmm.
And so I need this model, that model practice. And that's, yeah. And my dog, the natural example, he's not trying to do anything else. He's just
Hmm.
gradually doing what's right for him.
Yeah.
So the paradox in there is maybe that all these models are shortcuts. They're helping us optimize all of this sort of stuff. But the paradox is coming that maybe we can't absorb all of that anyway, or it creates too much optimization that we can't handle. I don't know. There's a paradox there, and it's helping us, but it's overloading us.
Thanks,
Because
gentlemen.
probably
It's going to kick us out right away. Yes, thank you. I will summarize over email and we'll keep in touch. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
sounds great. Thank you. Good to
Thank
meet you
you.
both.